Batik comes from the word ambatik, which can mean a cloth with dots or spots. The making of such exotic spots is not as easy as waving a hand. The driving force is the patterns themselves. It is not just a matter of drawing lines, it is the breathing of life into patterns full of dynamism. Some of these patterns are age-old, others emerging of ancestral designs with new concepts growing out of more recent contemplation. Batik begins with a piece of cotton cloth. Onto this cloth are transferred exotic forms, detail by detail, curve by curve, with the greatest possible perfection. Then, with exceptional care, the motifs are copied in liquid wax using a pen-like instrument called chanting, covering the cloth from one end to the other. This chanting has a little basin made of copper with a little spout. Because of the smallness, close precision is needed in the waxing process. Which is carried out with care and a sharp eye to ensure that the wax will flow easily onto the cloth. The wax, which is called malam, comes in various forms depending on the stage of batiking under work. Among them are pine resin wax and beeswax. Amid the pungent odor and hot thick smoke of the wax, women transform the plain white cloth into a beautifully decorated textile. Dyeing means the coloring of those parts of the cloth that are not covered in wax. For this, the waxed cloth is immersed into a cold dye bath. The most frequently used colors are blue, red, brown, and yellow. So that the colored cloth will glow to perfection, it is put out in the sun to dry. This process of dyeing and drying is duplicated as many times as is needed to get the desired depth and shades of color. When the color is right, the cloth can be cleaned of its wax covering. This is done by immersing it in boiling water. The dyeing process is replicated over and over again to get the desired number of colors. The more color variation, the more times the waxing and dyeing are repeated. The batik emerges from the very long and demanding process, beautifully colored and wonderfully decorated. There is hand wax batik and there is stem wax batik. In stem wax batik, the graceful function of the batik pen or chanting is taken over by a printing stamp for a repetitive pattern. This naturally shortens the time it takes to make a batik cloth, but it also sacrifices the power in the hand-drawn wax lines. Life carries on. Day turns into night and night into day. Likewise, the amazing art of batik is being preserved through tradition.
Making copper stamps is a complicated process, one that starts, of course, with the original artwork. But because copper stamps are made of folded bits of metal, there is a limitation to the amount of detail that can be shown, especially when you compare it to pen and ink on paper. Here you see the technician modifying the original artwork, removing some of the detail so that it comes into a format that can be translated into the copper. Once the design has been modified, the next step is for the worker to begin forming the copper strips into the pattern design. This involves a lot of cutting, bending, and clamping in order to manipulate the copper strip to fit into the pattern design. You can see that it's a very intricate and complicated process and takes a lot of time. Workers then tap those designs onto a metal frame in order to complete the stamp. Once all the elements are in place, the stamp is dipped into a solution that is made up of melted tree lacquer called tellenbun. The lacquer is boiled in a metal pot over a wood fire. The stamps are put into the metal pot and allowed to soak there for about 20 to 30 minutes. It is then allowed to dry and is polished. After this process, the lacquer holds the thin metal strips together and does not allow them to move when the stamps are pressed onto the fabric. Now that the stamp's been made, it's time to go over to the stamping room, where the workers put the motif-colored fabric onto tables and dip the stamp in a solution of paraffin and beeswax that's been melted. And you can see him placing the stamp in the pattern and making sure everything lines up. And it's really not at all as easy as it looks. I've tried to do this many, many times and have lots of practice, and still these guys won't let me near the stamping room.